When you're doing a piece of art, when do you know that you have finished? Because it's so subjective, right? You could work on it for forever. So at what point do you feel that I'm done with it?
I consider it done when nothing distracts me from seeing the whole picture. Because usually I stand like a few meters from the artwork and trying to observe the whole thing. And usually when I do it, I see little areas when I feel that need something. So I keep adding, then I again step back and then I observe how it changed. So I'll be doing it quite a lot, and it usually happens in the end. It's the most intense part of the process. It's literally I glue one paper, I stand back, I observe. I notice something else, then I glue another piece of paper. But that's how it happens in the end. At some point, I just look at it and there is nothing bothering my eye. I leave it be and I come back to it another day. And many times there will be a couple of more things that I'll notice with fresh eyes that I still need to tweak. But eventually, that's not much. And at some point, I just look at it and nothing really distracts me from seeing it as a whole.
Well, I thought it was very interesting as well. You said that you tend to finish 95% of your projects, which is really incredible. How do you keep at it? Because I can't imagine that you were very happy and motivated and driven to finish every single piece. So how do you keep going?
I rarely do it. I think there's literally just a couple times I decided to stop working. It's when I clearly see that it's a torture, it's just not going anywhere. Around the middle of every project, there comes the time when I might feel tired mentally or physically, when it's still a long way till the end. And I've already been working on it for a while. So this stage is, I know it can usually happen. That's why I'm used to like pushing through, which I kind of do even with artworks that are not going well. But if it continues for too long, and so I really feel that there is no progress, then I might leave it aside. But luckily, as I said, it doesn't really happen often. If I started something, in most cases, I finish it.
You said before you are inspired by Gustav Klimt, who's an Austrian painter, especially his golden face. Why is that?
I think that's again my Moscow education's legacy, because he was one of the celebrated artists who we were shown as an example. So many students like him, and I think that's when I also like fell in love with his work. I think it's that decorative aspect and use of patterns that really speaks to me. I don't know, it's difficult to explain. When you like something and draw something, I try not to overthink it.
And then one of the things I love is that you have personal projects and you have done 45 old people portraits. How did that personal project start?
At some point, after creating many typography-based designs and commercial client work, I felt I need to do something for myself. I don't know, that's how I started to considering doing some portraits with the paper. But it was really scary. I mean, nothing of it has been done, and it's not I'm really great in depicting people. At least back then I didn't have much experience apart from like few drawing and painting classes in my old art school. So I decided to focus on older people portraits, just because I knew that this edge glued paper should work fine for the wrinkled skin. But I couldn't even think that I would ever attempt doing a young person portrait. So kind of one step at a time. My first project, they were all depicting aged people, so I wouldn't worry too much about the smooth skin.
Your first portrait was of Babushka. Is there a story behind it?
It just there's no really story. The main thing about this portrait was how long it took me and how I struggled with the whole process. Right now I can do quite large artworks in a couple months, but this portrait, I think it's about 50 centimeters. So it's not crazy big, but it took me almost half a year to create it. Although I still was working on some commercial projects at the same time, so it's not clear time exactly, but still overall it was almost half a year. But the main issue was I just didn't know how to approach the eyes, the nose, where would I place the lines, what kind of paper do I use, how do I work around all the shadows that paper strips produce? How do I differentiate hair from the skin? I mean, those things you'll never know how to do unless you actually start doing them. That's why I was overthinking everything. I was concerned about every single strip of paper. I was worried, what if I don't know, place it in the wrong position? It will ruin the whole thing. So kind of more than half of it was just worrying about not doing it right.
Do you feel that it was a lot easier once you got that first portrait out of the way?
Yeah, I think once I finished it and I saw that it's actually good, I think in the middle of it, I decided on what my next portrait is going to be, because, you know, the 6 months length of work, I did start to look into other things. I was too kind of bored doing just the same portrait. So I had already planned for my next work. And after I finished this Babushka portrait, it was just confirmation that, okay, this technique works, the idea works, I can move on to the thing I planned to do. So, and the next one was The Man with Pigeons.
And how special was it to make a portrait of your own 88-year-old then grandmother?
Well, that happened a few years later when I discovered my technique of painting with paper. Yeah, it was quite emotional because I don't see her much. She's still in Russia. And I tried to turn off all the podcasts or videos I was watching on the background when I work. So I tried to think about her, kind of remember things we were doing together, just kind of be inside my memories while creating their projects. I think I cried a little, just missing her at that moment. And then I gave her this as a gift. So right now it's in her flat.
It sounds like your own journey with paper has undergone somewhat of an evolution. You started paper with drawing, and then you started with just the paper, and now you have watercolor with paper. How has that whole evolution gone?
So I think it's moved from a very neat, organized and structured, simple designs such as typography to more expressive, kind of colorful, freehand, emotional portraits, or I mean, not just portraits, just the style that is a lot more free. I think expressive would be the word. I compare it to expressionist art, but the main difference that instead of the flat brush stroke, I use the three-dimensional brush stroke, which I create by taking several strips of paper and folding them together in a very tight pack, like zigzag shape. So basically it's like a three-dimensional brush stroke. And my portraits and other artworks, they would be simply laid out of these three-dimensional brush strokes.
I wonder, was there a point as you were exploring all these different things that you realized, I can't do without this?
I really got this idea that that's what I'd like to be doing during that first half a year that I was experimenting. Because I remember, for instance, my husband, he would tell me, why you keep doing these things with paper when you had such lovely hand-drawn illustrations? But I already knew back then that no, I need to be doing this. Even though no one kind of saw it yet, no one liked it yet, I just had that inner knowing, that's it. And we thought that most likely I won't be doing it for a long time. I thought, okay, this style became popular. I'm known for it. Maybe I'll be doing it for a few years until people get tired of it and I'll be forced to switch something else. But then year after year, another year, and my techniques keep evolving and I keep experimenting. And every year I come up with something else and there's just no end to it. The longer I do it, the more excited I am about it and the more possibilities I keep seeing. So that's how it is.
You said before that when you first started, no one liked what you were doing. When was that moment when you realized that people did like it?
I think that having some commercial success and exposure that proved it to myself that I'm onto something. Although I did feel it from the beginning, as I said, it just takes some time for other people to see it as well.
I think for artists as well, it's not like any other career where everything is fixed and you know exactly where you're going. Once you had the Guardian article, how did you build your reputation so that more and more people will come to you? and want to commission you? Because right now I think most of your work is commission work, right? So how did you reach that level?
Literally one step at a time, and thanks to internet basically, because once your first project appears, someone sees it and they might get ideas of how to apply this style to their project. So it's just a snowball. Once you start, then usually it just happens organically. But I still had to go through kind of a change of direction, because a few years ago my commercial side of my art practice has really began to slow down. There was a point when I pretty much stopped doing commercial work, and I didn't panic. I think it came at the right time. I was quite tired of just creating work based on the brief or things that other people needed. So that was the time I didn't have commission, but I concentrated on working on my portraits, things that I wanted to create myself, like following my own ideas. I mean, what the real artist would do. Because when you work for clients or on a project, it's more like a designer, maybe, or kind of illustrators. You take someone's brief and you put your own mark on it. But when you actually, you're your own boss, and you go deep into things that you want to create, things to come out, then when kind of you become the real artist. So I concentrated on that, and gradually people started to come in, and my art practice switched focus. Right now I still do selected commercial work, but it's mostly either private commissions or just art that I create myself and then people might buy. And I must say, right now I enjoy this a lot more than the work I've been doing at the beginning. But still, I mean, every stage is great. So I appreciate every year.
So how did the idea of your book, which was published in September 2019, how did that come about?
I've been approached by many publishers to write a book, but the thing is, they always wanted me to do a tutorial book. I really felt a very strong resistance to the idea, like an inner no, and I really don't want to do tutorials. That's not where my strength, kind of an impact, can come from. So I've been saying no to quite a few. And at some point, one lady got in touch with me, and first she did ask about a tutorial book, but I think I was so fed up with these suggestions at that point. So I kind of released all my emotions in my reply to her, saying, I don't want to do a tutorial book. My work is not about, I want to encourage people to be free and kind of learn how to create things that not follow someone else's design. I wanted to find inspiration within themselves. So I don't do it often, but that time I just unleashed all my frustration onto her. And she said, oh, okay, so what kind of book would you write instead? And I thought about it, and I said that it probably would be something more about some techniques that I'm doing, but it would never give you some templates or steps that you need to follow. So I didn't have a concrete concept in my head, but we started this discussion, and little by little, this idea started to shape, and they decided to give it a go. And I was given half a year to write this book. And before I started writing it, I always kind of knew that I make decisions, I make creative decisions for a reason, but I could never formulate those decisions and like put things into words. Like, why do I use this specific color combination, or how do I mix paper? So I do things intuitively. I never apply logic or a thinking mind to how I do things. But during the writing of the book, I had to actually go inside and try to find those reasons why, to be able to explain them to people. And by doing that, I also kind of confirmed to myself that actually nothing is random. I do know why I do it, but just I didn't know how to explain it.
So why do you do it then?
Well, it depends on which particular aspect I'm writing about. I mean, how I select colors, or like about composition.
So you had this book, and then you also now have a new game app called Paper Mingle. How did they start?
It's an interesting twist. I would never thought I would be doing a mobile app, but basically after seeing the popularity of such great casual games as like Candy Crush, I got the idea that it would be nice to maybe create app inspired by my style, my paper art, and this way more people would be introduced to the type of work that I do. They would maybe learn what quilling is, because visually I think this paper and this style, it has really nice tactile and textured feel to it. And kind of from my example, I know when I even on a mobile phone, I usually like have some texture, not just smooth. So obviously I didn't do it myself. I have like friends who are developers. They basically took all my pictures and designs and applied their coding magic, making them move and interact. And it's a fun project because there are like new chapters we release every few weeks. So I always have to come up with new designs to make like every level and chapter look fresh and interesting. And I think it's the longest project I've ever been involved with, because usually even the longest artworks would take me maybe like a couple of months, half of the year, as we discussed. This project I started more than a year ago and it's ongoing. So it's really fun. I even like playing it myself because I find it relaxing.
So was this a project that kept you going, because this happened during COVID, right? So how has COVID impacted you, your work?
Yeah, the most part of the pandemic happened while I was developing this game, but I still kept working on my portraits and other commissions, so I can't really complain. I got more and more people interested in my work, and I think maybe because right now there's a need for like more beauty, more positive energy, and maybe just people want, now they are forced to stay at home for just longer periods, and they want to bring more like beautiful things inside their houses. So that's why maybe I get more commissions right now.
Yeah, I love that, while everyone's stuck at home, you have been so busy. One of the newest things you've done is this April, you put up your first NFT listing. So how did you first start thinking that I want to start an NFT project?
Well, I had no idea about NFTs. You can think of me like your like grandma. I'm really slow with the technology. Even though I made an app and everything, it's just digital things. They don't come easy to me. It actually was my husband who told me about NFT, and it took me quite a while and a few articles, a few videos just to get a basic idea what it is. But I mean, I'm usually open to different things to try. So I said, yeah, why not? I'll give it a try.
I mentioned a lot of artists listening to this who also want to try and make their own NFT. The big question is how? So what is the process?
You just first need to really learn and read, because right now there are so many sources, they explain the process. So first you get familiar with what it is and different options, because I think different platforms, they have slightly different ways of how they offer NFTs. And maybe the first step would be to choose like where would you start, who would you start with? Like I'm with Foundation, and I had to like ask a friend for an invite. So there are different platforms. Some of them are open to everybody, some of them you need to be invited. So I think the first step would be to look at different, maybe try to approach some of them, see like who you want to work with, and then usually they provide explanations of how to do it, and then you get started.
Why did you decide to settle with Foundation? What about them that you liked?
Well, I tried a couple others and they didn't reply. This was the third one I tried and I got in. So it's as simple as that. You just try different ones and the right door will open.
And what else can we expect from you?
Well, definitely more portraits. I think that's what I'm excited the most still, but on a larger scale. And I'm kind of experimenting with ways to work a bit faster so I can not suffer too much. So the lengthy process, although I don't really, but just I think with every attempt, I find ways to work more effectively. So right now, I think that's my focus. It's still nothing compares with seeing the real three-dimensional physical thing. Hopefully, once I kind of produce a bit some more of those large portraits, hopefully I'll maybe do my first proper exhibition.
And do you have any advice for people listening who want to be just like you?
Well, usually the main advice I can give is to just go for it and enjoy the process without putting too much expectations for the outcome that you'd like to achieve, because it rarely works when you have a certain idea of what you want to achieve and where you want to go. But if you just play with it, see where it takes you, experiment, sometimes you can like follow someone if you need to, but with this type of techniques, you don't really have to. And I think I'm the example that you don't really need to learn them. You just go ahead and then try different things, and it's the way to come up with something original, because when you know how to do things the right way, you might as well do it the other way and realize that that's the valid way as well.
For someone who is discovering your art for the first time, what kind of art pieces would you advise them to look at and explore and dive deeper?
The one that is called Free Spirit, which is on the cover of my book. I think that's maybe summarize the essence of my style, because it uses that very dynamic kind of freestyle. If you look closer, you will see that they are actually packs of paper braids element, which is kind of represents the experimentation part, which I always try to bring, because for instance, this portrait that I'm talking about, it came about because I started to make the braids out of white paper card. I made like a big bunch of them, like different thickness, and I said, what can I do with those? And I said, okay, I'm gonna like apply them in a certain pattern and like to make this woman's hair. And then I like find a photograph of the lady's profile that kind of fitted the rough idea that I had in my head. So it came out of the desire just to apply this nice little braid to something. But I think just any portrait will give you a good idea of what my style is and what it is about. I think what I want to convey with my artworks is like when you look at any of my portraits, you can see like they're alive. So you can feel that aliveness coming through, even though they're really rough, because there are even no drawn lines. Everything is just strips of paper, but somehow you can still feel the presence of a person behind them.
Do you feel like you have found your why?
Yeah, definitely.
And what kind of legacy would you like to leave behind?
I think for me, it's just I want people to appreciate beauty, and they want paper to be seen as a very, maybe it's like serious medium for conveying emotions, just to stand alongside all the other different mediums. I want to push the boundaries further with this particular paper techniques, again, to make people realize like the possibilities are endless, and it's a wonderful, wonderful way to create.
And what do you think are the most important qualities of a successful person?
I think a successful person really enjoys what he or she is doing. And regardless of the outcome, if it feels good, if you feel joy, then that's what is really important. And eventually it just comes through and other people start to feel it too. So as long as you enjoy it, that's the key.
And where can people go to find you, find out more about what you're doing, and even commission your work?
I think my website, www.artyulia.co.uk. And from there, I have Instagram, where I usually like post the most recent artwork, so sometimes work in progress, or Facebook. I think it's easier to go to the website first and then see